Yeah, and and I think I always I have a statement I've made for years. It's like our willpower is only a function of our opportunity. So if I use the example of like you're a celebrity and your willpower to be to be faithful to your significant other is
Sure.
is is under attack every single day by the beautiful
Right.
women or the beautiful men coming to you. Like, so your willpower might be good, you might have all the but you're a fallible human, and the temptations are always there. So it's like you may fall sooner than someone that has none of those opportunities. Food,
Yeah.
50 years ago, even whenever it started the agricultural revolution and all this, even we had the same genome. We want a cookie processed crap still tastes amazing in our brain, but we didn't have them. So we had to just go in the field, pick something, eat a carrot, move on with our day. So, you know,
Hmm.
and going back to the incentives, yeah, I 100% agree with you that individual responsibility at the root of it can overwrite anything the systems can put in place. Individual, right? It really, I'm a true believer in that, and I think that's what you just articulated. But again, the food industries, it's all for profit. I mean, so
Yeah.
it's we call food that's not crap organic food. Isn't that crazy? I always blow it. Why don't we just call that food? It's just
Right.
food.
Exactly.
It's like we
Yeah.
have to go out of our way to say we didn't screw that up. We're going to call that organic food and charge you triple because it's not very cost effective to get that to your table. Man, that's a crazy thing that we live in. Now, you could say, well, we've come a long way and there's a lot less hunger in the world. Yeah, that's true. Although there's a balance there to make food cheap and to keep people from starving, but it's also a poison. So anyway, it's
Yeah.
interesting. You're right that the individual responsibility. But when I drive that by that McDonald's, and I tend to eat mostly healthy, but I know what that thing tastes like, and oh my god, I'm thinking about it now. My mouth's watering. Right? I mean, it's just like they hack the code in our brains. So, I mean, they know
Exactly.
what. Yeah,
That's exactly what has
yeah.
happened. And so I love that you brought up the will piece. It's a favorite topic of
Mm,
mine. Um, I'll keep this tangent very, very short. But one of the things I appreciate about the great tradition, so I mentioned the medical side of it, but I'm a lifelong meditator
mm,
and fan of the kind of the yoga tradition and the Sankhya yoga tradition in particular. But one of the things that I love about the yoga tradition is they identified this
they
centuries ago,
have,
like
they have,
eons
yeah.
ago. And one of the core practices is is the practice of working on one's will. And
Mm,
so built into the very, very early stages, when I say yoga, I don't mean the bendy, stretchy classes. No, like that's not yoga, right? That it's the yoga is this set of
mm,
disciplines. And the first one is working on the will, because I understand that you have to have the energy, you have to have control of the mechanism
yeah.
to put the I want where to put it where you want it to
Mm,
be. That it isn't left to chance or whim, or it's not riding on your neurophysiology or your gastronomics, your
right.
stomach, right? That you, the individual, the subject, have control of this thing called will, and you can put it where you want it and it stays
Mm,
there. And so this is, like meditation is the disciplining of attention, right?
yeah. Where do you
The
put your
the
attention? Yeah.
the so yoga, part of yoga, right? The practice, the disciplining of the will. And so on one level with meditation, you're learning how to put your attention on something and keep it there.
Mm,
And another part of yoga is you're learning how to put your will on something and keep it there. And so we culturally lack any curriculum in this regard. We jettisoned any curriculum
mm,
that we had around this, and we just left it wide open, as if it's like just naturally going to find its path, and we don't ever need to think about it or talk about it. And then we grew a culture that is, again, people out there who said, I can make money by manipulating
right.
these people's will, make it colorful, make it salty, make it sweet, whatever. I can manipulate the
Hmm.
organism and get the outcome I want. And we could follow this tangent right back into our starting
Mm,
conversation
yeah.
around bioelectric medicine, and again, Michael Levin's work. But we could look at the idea of memes, so not internet memes, but Richard Dawkins
Hmm.
memes. And so we do this, like we're all susceptible to this. So if we think of something like a parasite, and the parasite could be something as simple as a fungus, right? So there's this fungus that will infect an ant, and it'll make the ant climb up to the end of a blade of grass so that it gets eaten by a mammal that's grazing, because that fungus wants to get into the brain of a
Mm.
mammal. It wants to get where the resources are best, right? So it's driven in that way. And so this poor ant is really pronounced to it, its will is hijacked, and it crawls up to the blade of grass where it's at greater likelihood of getting
Mm.
digested, right? And we see a similar but different fungus in the brains of high performing people. So often, like the research focused on like CEOs, and so some of your most successful CEOs have the highest um, portion or concentration of this fungus. And it's this idea that we're, that these people are driven to um, enact behavior that gets them into the most resource rich circumstance. And that's because the fungus
Mm.
wants that. The fungus wants access. So how does the fungus get access? It drives in this case, a person, and not just an ant, but a person, into making the behaviors that gets them to make a lot of money so that they live a lavish lifestyle and they're well fed and the fungus is getting what it wants, right? So we can think about this all the way down to that level, that we are being biologically hacked
So I
and
followed your
drives
ant
behavior.
analogy, and there's plenty of those parasitic sort of analogies out there, and they're fascinating when you look into them. Are you saying that there's actually you using metaphor, or there's an actual fungus for the CEO example?
Actual fungus,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. There's some research that came out a little while ago uh, that that
give
that
me some of
talked
that.
about this. And again, I'm picking I'm sensationalizing what the article about the research sensationalized, which was pointing at CEOs
Yeah,
as if, because we all like to bash them.
right.
Um, but it really is disproportionate across highly successful people. So musician,
Hmm.
athlete, and a person who is driven,
Mm.
uh, that we see the operation of this fungus. And again, it's not the explanatory reason that everybody who's successful has that. It's just disproportionate.
Hmm.
All anybody who has it, potentially, like anything, like we all are full of funguses and bacteria. We're largely constituted by microbes as
Yeah.
much as we think like we're people. We're mostly microbes. Um, and and so this is not anything all that radical. It's just finding that this particular microbe is disproportionately found in highly successful
Hmm.
people. And its meme effect is to drive what the person thinks is their own will, their own volition, but that volition is actually being driven, essentially by a
Right,
parasite.
right, right. Yeah, I mean, I was wondering, has anyone ever, is there anyone working on bottling this thing? I mean, who wouldn't want that, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
right?
That's
Again,
funny. That's what everybody
yeah, let's just,
says.
give me some of
Like,
that.
how do
I
I
mean,
get
yeah,
some?
I mean,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, because all these nootropics are out there, and I think when I look through them, the data is all like, none of this stuff works. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know. We know caffeine works. We know Adderall works. There's some things that do work, right? They get you moving. But
Yep.
those nootropics and all that. I mean, that's an interesting world, But if you could have this fungus that's going to make me want to be more productive,
Mhm.
I mean, who wouldn't take that? I mean, you know what I mean? Again, the
Yep.
Adderall thing. I think half the people in the freaking world, in the developed world, I feel like are on it. Go to Silicon Valley, go to New York City, go to Washington D.C. I'm in D.C. I know a lot of people on it. They have a lot of energy at 5:30 in the morning, and they're crushing it. And it's not generally because they got a good night's sleep. There's something else going on there, right? It's the intellectual steroid, if you will. That's what folks in
Mhm.
my world kind of call it, and it's true. It is true. But so the real thing, I wanted to get into, and I think this is mostly in the category of your CerebralFit company. Now, you look at all the devices you have, and you see these. I get images of sharper image, and you put the thing on your head, and you got the infrared flashing, and my first reaction, to be a little honest here, is like, come on, man, really? right? When I first started looking you up, like, okay, come on.
Yep.
And then, of course, I'm like, all right, well, open minded, let's dig into this. And you start looking into it. You guys, the science is there. I mean, there's a lot of legitimate. And I started going, oh shit, okay. Well, again, why isn't this taking off like more than? Why am I
Mm-hmm.
thinking I relatively open minded person? My first reaction was, oh come on, man, really? When it should have been, oh wow, why are why don't I have one in my home? Because I mean, or whatever, right? I'm not just to oversell out of the gate here, but there seems to be an enormous amount of actual foundational science behind electrical and light therapy and everything that you guys are going on there. So I guess little background on these devices and how where you
Sure.
guys are with them and what the science behind it is and how effective are these?
Yeah. So maybe we'll just do just a quick rundown just to kind of get a
Yeah.
context set.
Please.
So we have our near infrared helmet. And it isn't just light, it's light, but it can be programmed to pulse in really any frequency, but mostly we work in the known brain waves, so in the delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma. Um, so it does both light and entrainment. And then we have our audiovisual entrainment device, which is photic entrainment, auditory entrainment, and transcranial stimulation. We have our nasal light, and the nasal light also comes with ear lasers. So we have nasal lasers and ear lasers, which is exactly that. It's just lasers you stick in your nose and lasers you stick in your ear that can do continuous light or pulse light. And then we have a mouth guard. So we've got a red mouth guard, a red blue mouth guard, and a red near infrared mouth guard. So that's just to get light into the oral cavity. And we have a panel set. So we have uh, blue, red, near infrared, and then one that is just red, near infrared. And then we have a microcurrent device for delivering alternating current stimulation or direct current stimulation to the body for all the
Mm,
reasons that's good. So body or brain
gotcha.
can be used. And we call that, it's kind of the digital pharmacy.
Right.
Is it's not like a tens that just kind of gives you four frequencies. It's a highly complex device that you program like a computer that can have thousands of effects in the body, changing the the bioelectric gradient at the cellular level, and getting the body to do more of what we want and less of what we
Mm,
don't want. So these are our devices that we have chosen, and the only way that a device makes it into the CerebralFit lineup is if it's proven itself in the clinic. So in my clinic, in Dr. Robot's clinic, we have to have seen it have positive effects in our patient base, and that it's reliable, predictable outcomes. And then we'd consider moving it into the CerebralFit lineup. Because again, for me, at the end of the day, I'm not a salesperson. I, but I do sell things.
yeah.
I'm not a device manufacturer, although we do make some of our own devices now. I'm a healthcare provider, and my first and foremost concern is about the well-being of my client and getting them the healthcare outcome that they
Mm,
want. And so whatever I do has to work. If it doesn't work, I don't want to do it. I'm just not interested. You can't deliver healthcare in
mm,
that way. So I start as a healthcare provider. My primary role with my people that I work with is as a healthcare provider. These just happen to be the tools that I use, but we're not limited to this, right? Like in our Bredesen clinic, we use functional medicine. Absolutely, we use allopathic medicine in lab tests and blood tests and do all of it. So nothing is left out. But my particular um, piece is the bioelectric medicine. So I tend to talk
mm,
about that. So those are the devices that we currently in our lineup. And so if we go back to light, and I was the same as you, when a provider in my own clinic came to me and said, Guy, I want to start doing light therapy, and told me about what she was going to do, my reaction was like, really? Is that a thing?
yeah.
And she's like, no, honest, it's a thing. And I'm like, let me look into that. And then I went and looked, and I was like, oh wow, there's a whole long list of NIH studies on this showing that low level light therapy and LED light has a medicinal effect. It has a biological effect. I had no idea. So yeah, my mind went from no to yes, and it went there just because I looked at the research. And you're like, okay, like these are world class researchers at the best
Yeah.
institutions around the world. There's 40 years of research, hundreds of thousands of studies. I like it's not a debate. right? And that was like me moving, within myself from this isn't a thing to this is a
Right.
thing, because you just look at it. But then I started to use it, and that was the real, thing that convinced me as a practitioner was, oh, by bringing this into my practice, my people are getting better faster. Conditions I couldn't change before are changing, or conditions I could work on, but it might take me in my kind of orthopedic side, it might take me 6 months to resolve this condition, and now I'm able to do it in
Hmm.
2 months, and the outcome is better. That was the real, like, okay, the research is there, great, but the proof is in the pudding. They work. And the kind of the way I explain it is, especially for the light, this is mostly true for the light, is basically what we're talking about here is human photosynthesis. And we think about photosynthesis being for plants and not for people. And we don't really, I've never thought like, oh, I want to go buy a new plant for the garden. I wonder if it'll work. Like, I've never had that question, right? Like, you buy the
Yeah.
plant, give it some water and some nutrients, and it lives. Like for the most part, like that 100% of the time, plants
Hmm.
photosynthesize. They take light energy and turn it into food and oxygen, and
Yeah.
just that, right? And none of us really question that. So when we look at, like, our human bodies do the same thing with the sun. We take sun energy and turn that into a bioavailable energy, and and that's, kind of like,
Hmm.
that's it. Now there is a little bit of a, like plants put off oxygen, the human body will put off free radicals from that process. So this is where the pairing of grounding, earthing, so putting bare feet on the ground, and then sunlight, what happens is we become a
Hmm.
battery. That process of charging your battery with the sun, 100%, it literally works like that. There's about 1,400 different uh, chemical products we produce by getting sunlight. The most known one is vitamin
Hmm.
D, right? You go out in the sun and you produce vitamin D, and so that's true, but but for many, many more substances in the body. So we're like, life evolved to work with
Hmm.
photons as energy sources, and not just energy. They do more than energy. They're forms of communication within the body. They have a lot of function. So what we do in light therapy is probably the most medicinal bandwidths of light right now are red and near infrared. The science is showing us that the most benefit comes from this, from between something like 600 and 1,000 nanometers, right in there. So visible red to invisible red. Um, and basically, what we've done is we've taken out the ones that tend to be more harmful at longer exposures, and longer being more than a minute. So your UV
Yeah.
rays, your blues. So we eliminate those, and we just take the ones that are beneficial. We can drive cellular physiology in known, predictable, repeatable ways with that as a mm, again, it's like a pharmaceutical, except that's the chemical side,
Right.
right? So the chemical side is what we do with pharmaceuticals. We're chemical electric beings. So on the electrical side, we can drive our electrophysiology using photons, or if we're going to do stim, using
Hmm.
ions. And again, it's really, it's physics, it's biology. It's not, there's no woo
Hmm.
in here. Yeah.
So when you're just applying these, whatever the signal is,
Mhm.
light photons, electricity, ions, how do you, in other words, is there a dysfunction that you're observing initially where the application of these signals change the notable dysfunction, and how, I guess I have a lot to learn here, but like, well,
Yeah.
how you kind of almost verifying, before and after sort of thing.
Sure. Yep. Yeah. So good question. So I'll just say, so like in there, the main root was this idea of like, is there a problem that you're
Mm, yeah.
fixing? Right. And so I mean, that's a fine thing, but we'll just say that's allopathic medicine, pathology, right?
Yeah.
And and we think a little bit more on the positivistic side of you're vitalizing the system rather than negating some pathogenic force. So it's like negativistic versus positivistic, and it's not like we don't have to have an either or and one is
Right.
better, but it's just to be kind of clear in the mindset that we're going into. So analogy that I like to use is is just going to put it into the real world for a little bit. So just kind of pick like just an average person, just living an average, middle class life, and you have a certain amount of income, and then you have a certain amount of expense, and you hope to kind of keep those two in a relative balance to one another, where your income exceeds your expense um, by some
Mm-hmm.
margin, right? And there we go, right? That's a middle class life. but but always, if you look around, a person's home, there are things that haven't been repaired, and it's like, well, that's time and money to do
Mm,
that, and it's not that big of a deal, so you just kind of let it go, right? So it's the hand railing that's loose, it's the, you
right. Right.
name it, right? The screen that's torn, the window that opens kind of sideways, the door that squeaks when you open it. And we have all of these things that kind of grow in our environment that we just don't take care of. Although we could, we don't invest resources in them because we have this sense that resources are
Mm-hmm.
constrained money, right? Time and money, right? So what happens if you take that person and then you increase their income by a meaningful amount, right? So give that person an extra $10,000 a month, right? Well, what's going to happen across the most part, right? Is those things that weren't getting taken care of are going to get taken care of. All of a sudden, the handrail is fixed because you hire somebody to come in and fix it, and the screen is
Mm-hmm.
fixed, and the window opens properly, and all of those things get taken care of. Okay, so that's just same basic thing that we all live, most of us live, in our day-to-day lives. Think of the same thing in the body. So when we take and we put photons in, it's like giving the body money,
Mm,
right? We're giving it at the lowest, simplest level. We're giving it more energy because red infrared light drives mitochondrial activity, which increases ATP production, and ATP is the
mm,
base energy molecule for the body to do everything. So even if we just look at it there, what happens is we give the body more energy. And when it has more energy, it it will allocate those resources to get to some of that deferred
mm,
maintenance that it hasn't been getting to because we've been in a bit more of a survival mode, because most of us aren't actually, in terms of our health, we're not living a middle class lifestyle. We're living more of in
mm,
poverty. Our debt is exceeding our income, and we're building up a growing and growing debt. And that's our lack of
mm,
vitality. That's aging and degeneration and that, right? So if we increase our resources, give our body more resources, it will deploy it for healing and regeneration. Just very simple, without being
yeah.
without
Yeah.
overthinking it. That's exactly what we see happen. Is we put light in as a resource. Now it doesn't just drive this one function. Like, I'll go the next one. So mitochondria, good research now telling us that mitochondria don't just produce ATP, which is, they've always been thought like that's their main thing and why we celebrate them. But it turns out they actually are paramount in cell to cell signaling.
Mm,
So information processing, information distribution within the broader system. So mitochondria are important for cell signaling. And so driving more cell signaling just means our information processing networks are stronger and more robust, which keeps the whole system on the plot. It keeps
mm,
your brain being a brain, and your liver being a liver, and your kidney being a kidney. And that's what we want. We want those organs and tissues to have the information to keep doing what they're doing the way they're supposed
mm,
to do it. So mitochondria is super important in that role. And I could keep going. I mean, nitric oxide, there's reactive oxygen species, there's mRNA. So one of my favorites is it optimizes when a cell makes a copy of itself. And so the genome is being rebuilt into a new cell, right? So this RNA transcriptase level, that red infrared light optimizes that process. So the chances of genetic repair go up.
Mm.
Most of the time, the forces of degeneration are leading to errors in the transcriptase process. And so the copy of the gene goes down.
Hmm.
By adding the light, the chances of the, the reliability of that gene going up
Hmm.
increases. So we can get genetic repair. So we're having an epigenetic effect at the genetic level. Right? And so there's this long list of benefits that come from it that aren't anti any disease. They're pro the activity of life.
Yeah, make the
Right?
system as strong as possible and increase resilience, increase repair without being very specific about any one of those things. Right? It makes
Correct.
it's almost like, and I don't know if it's a bad analogy or good, but if you're just generally vitamin deficient, if you don't get enough sun, and you add all those things, you're not taking a really good supplement, or you're eating really good whole foods one day, and you just switch and you're getting more sun. That alone would, I would think, increase just general health across all domains. And it sounds like what you're
Yep.
saying is the addition of this light therapy is sort of doing the same thing at the cellular level, just with light. It's not targeting any one thing,
Mm-hmm.
but build the system foundationally, increase the resources, the income, to your analogy. That does make sense. It really does.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And then if we kind of touch in again to a little bit of our entry point
Mm.
into this, where we were talking about again Michael Levin's work, but also this idea of agency and communion. This idea. So Michael Levin's theory, what he calls TAME, technological approach to mind everywhere,
Mm.
is this idea that mind goes all the way down. Mind is not just a human or even an low level like animal. And you have to have a cortex to be able to have a mind. It's understanding, and it's not just his work. I mean, it's growing. There's more and more evidence to support it across the different scientific disciplines. So you've got this happening in chemistry, you have this happening in physics, where they're starting to show that there's a testable, trainable intelligence all the way
Mm.
down. So if we accept this, then we say that our cells have agency, they have intelligence. And then the individual cells that come together to form a tissue. So maybe it's a nephron in a kidney or whatever, right? So we've got a structure. That structure has an
Yeah.
intelligence on how to be the best, whatever it is. Like my liver has an intelligence to be the best liver that it can be. So if we give the resources and allow the local intelligence to deploy them, we get much better results than if we try and
Mm.
micromanage it, right? And that's largely what you see happening on the pharmaceutical side. They want to get
Mm.
more and more targeted to use a chemical intervention to go in and force change in like the smallest possible uh, interaction that they could do. And part of that is good because when you have a strong change agent that can have a broad effect, that's where you get your side effects.
Yeah.
Because you change, chemical reactions happening in the body in places you didn't want to change
Right.
them, but you pay that price to change the ones you do. So as they get more and more targeted, which is great, less side effects, but more powerful change, but they're going in and they're kind of forcing the change. And so the intelligence is in the mind of the scientist who says, I think this is what needs to be done here. Or then it's in the
Mm.
mind of the doctor who prescribes the chemical to say, I think your system needs to be forced in this direction.
Almost
What we're
overriding the
saying,
individual intelligence at the cellular level, where I think, if I'm hearing you
exactly.
right, your approach is let's let's give the intelligence at the cellular level the greatest amount of resources to start with, and let it do its natural thing. Is that, as opposed to the pharmaceutical approach, where it's like let's come in strategically, try to override some of that individual intelligence with our own quote unquote intelligence to fix a certain. Is that what I heard you say?
Yep, you got it. Exactly
That's
that. Yep.
brilliant. I
Yep.
love that
And
analogy. That really resonates. That makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. And so we see this again, this is not a novel concept. We see this in the traditional forms. When if you I'm trained as an acupuncturist, worked as an acupuncturist for a number of years, but decided I didn't really like sticking needles in people. So I kind of let it go as a practice, but I love the
yeah.
theory. And this is very much in the theory of Chinese medicine or homeopathy in many forms where they're oriented at working with the intelligence. So in Chinese medicine, that would be the
Mm,
qi. And so you're working with the qi, the local intelligence, and it's often translated as energy. And we again think about in our reductionist Western way as it's just electricity like is running through the wires in my house, right? And an acupuncture point is a light switch, and I flip the switch and energy runs down this pathway. No, I mean, sure, that sort of works at a very low resolution map. But if we start to think about it as it's an intelligence, and what I'm doing is bringing an intelligence into an area because that area has kind of lost the plot and it needs to be brought back into the kind of the group
mm,
mind of that area. Then I bring in the resource of intelligence. It kind of reminds that local milieu of what it's supposed to be doing. And we see it, health emerges, where we never took on a pathological force, right? So, like Chinese medicine doesn't really have pathologies in
mm,
it, not the way we do in the West. They have this idea of the loss of an intelligence, and but what I love about Michael Levin's work is he's showing this in a Western paradigm, but but he's also able to do things that the traditional forms would say is possible, but nobody can actually
mm,
do. But there's a theory for it, right? They can perfectly look and say, oh, so you're saying you could regrow an arm, right? And then somebody in Chinese medicine or somebody in osteopathy would say, like, yes, like our theory says we could do it. We just don't have anybody who actually can. But then you bring in Michael Levin, who wouldn't in no way would I say he's using Chinese medicine theory or osteopathic theory. He's doing his own thing, but the maps line up perfectly. The difference is when he says I want to regrow a leg in an animal that doesn't regrow a leg, or in this case a frog, he can regrow the
mm,
leg. He turns on the subroutine for grow leg here. 14 months later, there's a leg. He says grow an eye here, and a tadpole will grow an eye on the tail that will be
mm.
wired in to the brain and works and can use as an eye. And he's gotten to a point where like they can predict what ion channels need to be changed to bring about the thing that you want to
Mm.
bring about, change those ion channels, and then step back and watch the native intelligence do the job without any micromanaging.
Yeah.
Right? When he says like grow an eye here, he's not in there saying, well, now I need a lens and I need a second level
Right.
of a
Right. Right.
lens and then I need some vitreous fluid, and in there doing that, he's just like, nope, subroutine, grow an eye here, and the intelligence of the organism already knows how to make an eye.
Mm,
So it just sets about making an eye. And it will grab local tissue that is maybe supposed to be muscle tissue and say, hey, come here. I need you to be an eye cell. And it can recruit that non eye tissue into participating in the
yeah.
development of an eye. And it does that by changing the local intelligence, the mind around that cell. And so this approach, I think, is going to be a very promising part of medicine. And again, he's already shown it in his work in cancer. And cancer is basically healthy cells that have become disconnected from the local mind. And so he's been able to show that you can take healthy cells, disconnect them, they'll form a tumor, they'll move on to be just like cancer. You can take that cancer tumor that you just created and you can reattach it to the local mind, and it will go back to being normal cells.
Wow.
And then repeat that back and forth, tumor, no tumor, tumor, no tumor. in the same animal, just on, off, on, off.
That's
And
crazy.
so that holds great
Mm,
promise for future treatments of cancer, and certainly that they are working on that. And they're in an
mm.
animal model showing regrowing a limb in an animal as opposed to an amphibian. Now they're to an animal model and having success. So there's a lot of there in what he's doing, but what he's doing is not different than what the traditions have held for thousands of years. So what we do in biologic medicine is we try and leverage that same system of intelligence, but using electroceuticals instead of pharmaceuticals or nutraceuticals. So diet would be nutraceuticals, pharmacological medicine would be
Mm.
pharmaceuticals. We use electroceuticals to change the electrical gradient at the cellular and tissue level to kind of remind the system of what it's supposed to be doing, and kind of talk
It's
it out
fascinating.
of the pathology that it
Yeah,
was
I mean, you
doing.
just proved the point that yeah, this is not just mumbo jumbo. This is legit science, reproducible in lab data. True scientists. And it's. I mean, there's so many things we could unpack there. We just don't have the time, unfortunately. But I sense a part two. I'm gonna propose that here. Because there's so many questions, and I got to wrap this up, unfortunately. But I mean, the one thing, and I'll just end with this. I want to
Yep.
give you a chance to let folks know where they can find you. But I've been so fascinating lately with how you having a designer of the universe can coexist with the evolutionary theory. I don't think the two are incompatible.
Mhm.
I just don't. Right. I just don't. I
Absolutely.
know that's very gets controversial, and you know, yes, I'm a Christian, so obviously I have a want to look at that side, but I'm also a data science geek, and I want to. If obviously, adaptation is a real thing. We just know it. Anyway, one phrase you said. You said intelligence. We said intelligence so many times at the cellular level. I mean, so it's like,
Yep.
man, and the more we learn about how these little tiny individual, these cells are, we keep going deeper and deeper, deeper, and we don't get to the point where we say, oh, that's just a little dumb little thing. It just keeps getting more and more complex the further we look in, which is,
Yes.
it's just fascinating. I don't know where this will end someday,
Yep.
but man, it's really cool. And it sounds like everything you're talking about, you're completely harnessing and leveraging and relying on that science. So
Absolutely. And I think kind of what you were, kind of obliquely pointing to there, in there being kind of an
yeah.
intelligence, and maybe something around design and intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
I think anybody who spends enough time in anything like kind of what I do, anything dealing with living organisms, I, I I don't know how that can't be the the awareness that comes from it. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I say that sitting in rooms with people who do something similar to what I do, um, and do not have that perspective at all. Like they completely would argue that as an incorrect conception. Um, but again, I would say I think anybody who's really paying attention to what they're doing, this is an inescapable realization that we're dealing with intelligent, like life is intelligent all the way down. And I believe the research that tells us that it isn't just life. If we skip past biology and we go into chemistry, there's research that shows that chemical reactions have an
Mm-hmm.
intelligence. You can put up barriers and they will figure out ways around the barrier to do what they want to do. And similarly at the level of physics. And so, yeah, I think we're not far away from this being just an accepted fact that we bake into our science, and we begin to operate on it as just another
Mm.
principle. Law of thermodynamics is that there's intelligence and it can be worked with.